Hello, everyone. Bruce Morris from the Tab Group here. Welcome to Market Structure Wave. Last month, CJC published a very insightful report on overcoming market data landscape challenges and complexities on TabbFORUM. The report included several actual use cases focused on the commercial application of their proprietary technologies to control costs and maximize efficiency across the enterprise. Today, we are very fortunate to have Sara Baker, CJC's Global Head of Commercial Management, and Alistair Brooker, Calero's VP General Manager Market Data, join us on Market Structure Wave to talk about index licensing management in the capital markets. Hey, Sara. Hi, Alistair. Welcome to TabbFORUM.
Hi, Bruce. Thank you very much.
Nice to be here. Thanks.
Oh, you're both welcome. So, Alistair, to get us started, can you level set our discussion today with the description of index licensing in the capital markets in general terms?
Yeah, sure. So, tricky situation, tricky industry to look after, I would say, is what I would begin by saying. It sits very kind of neatly next to, I suppose, core market data function in the industry. And the difficulty, I think, is within this kind of index licensing world is overcoming challenges around sort of opaque, lack of data, lack of visibility, lack of understanding in terms of what spend, in terms of what contracts, in terms of what products and services are actually provided to majority of these customers from these index vendors. You could align it very nicely to the market data world of, say, 20 years ago, where it was a tricky challenge back then trying to get some data into an inventory management system to try and take hold of it. And we, as software providers, inventory management system providers, now see that for, the common challenge for all of our customers, where they are, particularly on the buy side, struggling to understand what contracts they have, what product, what index families they have linked to these particular contracts, what that relates to in terms of the actual index structure, constituent licenses, benchmarks, that kind of thing. And it's a real challenge, now and also previously, right?
So let's not go back 20 years, but what was it like 4 to 5 years ago?
Well, so 4 to 5 years ago, wasn't too different, but that's about when it started really ramping up, and the organizations costs were increasing rapidly due to a kind of a lack of control of these indexes. But that from that, there was kind of a lot of new regulation that came into play, probably around, I think it was 6 years ago now. BMR came into play, and there was a much more control around the use of indexes. There was new regulation, means obviously costs are going up, and organizations had to pay more attention to their costs and the use of their indexes. There was much more complex contracts being placed around the licensing of these indexes. So that meant it was much more time consuming to manage. And a lot of firms struggle with like the manpower to get their head around this. That also then leads to kind of, a loss of control of the cost, but a loss of control of your contractual and legal landscape, and a requirement for more staff internally, therefore more costs. There's a theme. There's a theme here around this, and as Alistair says, this is where market data was 20 years ago, and now we've got this new challenge to deal with, and there doesn't seem to be kind of one size fits all, which makes it even more complex.
Yep.
Go ahead, Alistair. Sorry, I didn't want to.
No, I was just going to echo that. I mean, for some of these buy-side firms, this is some of their largest spend, in the index license, vendor space. It's if you look at a bank, the majority of their spend would be around core market data. If you look at a buy-side organization, they're going to be spending much more than, core market data spend on index license data. And of course, it's a huge challenge to maintain, as Sara was pointing out, right? So, yeah, we're going to certainly dig into it, I would imagine, in this discussion.
Yeah, well, let's talk about, how have indices traditionally been managed, and what are the specific challenges that businesses are facing managing these databases?
So traditionally, they've been managed in the way that other market data has been, but I would say attention hasn't been put on the use cases. So how is that data being used? And due to the new regulations and the increased complex licensing models, organizations are getting caught out a little bit with how they're using the data, but also the constant changing business models as well, for a requirement to use them in a different way across a different part of their organization, through a different application, just using that data in a different way. And often these index licenses have got quite niche restrictions on how you can use that data. So it does need to be reviewed at every step of the way. Every request your license has to be reviewed. And that requires tight control, lots of knowledge in how that data needs to be used. So it does, again, going back to kind of what Alistair said earlier, is that this was where we were with investment market data prior. The exchange agreements have got more complex over the years, but now this is being applied to the index providers, and they bundle things together, not in any streamlined way, and actually has been found, what we have found across our clients is that one organization has got a very different bundle of products at a different price point to the other. So it's quite complex.
Are there any specifics you'd like to share on, how this has to be managed differently than a core market data vendor product?
It's the specific language and terminology used in these licenses that is catching organizations out. I mean, probably don't want to point fingers and call out any names, but there's not a structure, there's no template that's being used, and as Alistair mentioned earlier, his database, the ILM, is there to capture this data, and that piece of data is getting bigger and bigger and more complex as the years go by.
Yeah, I mean, I would sort of finish by saying core market data has some great structure with contracts defined at the top, and then underneath that, the products and services that are then allocated out to the business underneath. That's always traditionally been made, especially over the last couple of decades, as we talked about. It's traditionally always been made available for front office users, end users, to be able to see what they're licensed for, what they're allocated for, what the cost allocation is, how much it's costing, how much the business is splitting it. Because it's transparent data, it's made readily available, it's easy to track. Index license management is the complete opposite of that, where you've got, Sara exactly called it out earlier, you've got vendors signing contracts with consumers and providing one-liners on packages, index families that they're providing to them. There's no transparency of what constituent licenses, products, benchmarks, underneath that are being provided as part of that family, or who it's available to, which regions, which departments, which entities. There's not often much offering in terms of files or API integrations or seeking some of that inventory data. So a huge challenge, as we've talked about all the way through. It's just, opaque pricing, difficult to identify, spiraling costs due to duplicates being bought because the companies don't know how much they bought, what they bought. There's no detail in that information. And why would a index vendor make that obvious and transparent if they're making a nice revenue stream from it? So it's that kind of typical model that you would see here, and it's a challenge that needs solving for these customers.
Well, thanks for that. But so let's continue along that line. You both have discussed ways that indices can be managed from scratch, but I understand Calero has an existing plugin with your offering. Can you provide an overview on that?
Yeah, sure. So 28 years ago, I'd say we built our market data manager system. So that's known as MDM in the industry, and obviously covering all of that core market data function. But I would say about 4 or 5 years ago, our customers heavy on the buy side that had a lot of this growing index spend were seeking out something a lot more complex, detailed, granular, that they could start building up, add data to, and really try and tackle the managing of this growing spend in the index data world. So Calero built the Index License Manager product 4 or 5 years ago, with some help from some customers, with feedback, and that has been typically the way that we've built all of our products. We've built them to a said requirement at the start, thought some really interesting feedback from the experts in the industry, and then iterated that over time, and with valuable customer feedback, that kind of grows into the the leading products that they are today, and that's obviously allowing these customers and prospective customers to be able to seek out a solution to managing this index license challenge. It would store typical things like typical data sets, like contracts, as we talked about before, contracts, and then the product index families underneath those contracts that's being provided by those vendors. You can then start to load in more granular information, so license usage types, benchmark constituents, issuance data, derived data, categorizing all of that, as well as asset class verification, and then you can build in more detail to help you sort of manage it better, like bringing in catalog data, index catalogs, the licenses to understand what you're actually licensed for, removing the need for duplicate purchases, etc. And then you can also, once you've got that powerful data in place, you can then do things like fund allocation, loading in fund master files, doing declarations out to those vendors for those complex fee models, and really tackle the challenge of the front office users having to always call up the back office users to say, what are we licensed for? There's no need for that anymore, right? There's no need for that kind of manual effort, that sort of picking up the phone and thinking off the top of your head, are we licensed for that or not? You can actually place the system in front of these front office users to self-serve, and that's when the Index License Manager really comes to the front of solving these challenges.
So that's a great segue for my next question, because now that we've talked about the solution, Index License Manager, but let's talk about the data for this container. Where can firms get this data from?
So this is generally from the providers. This is not something as simple as asking for an agreement, because we've touched on that earlier, where sometimes it's just a couple of lines and someone's signed up to an agreement. You really do need to build a relationship with the providers to get the level of granularity to get back into ILM, to allow that to be managed in a way that Alistair's just described. And ILM is just a really powerful tool, but it needs the data in it to use that power, and also add that automation to the process of requesting and checking new licenses, or requesting new data. But the vendors, the providers, are where we need to get that information from, and then interpret that information, because it's not always in standard English, and standard language and terminology is different across the board. There's no standard terminology across the providers. So we need to interpret that information to put that into ILM.
Sorry, exactly right. There's catalog data probably out there from these vendors. They're just not making it available.
No.
There's files and APIs to sort of show these customers what they're licensed for. It's in quite short supply. Some vendors are, delivering that, some on. But there are some potential opportunities. There are some aggregator vendors out there that have the capacity to see a more widely spanning, I would say, view of the industry, with catalog data available, with licensed data available on. So, you know, there is opportunity that we are seeing to potentially start exploring.
So you both have mentioned the challenges of managing this type of initiative, and I understand this is something you have both recently worked on. Can you detail the ILM project and some of the specific work you've both completed?
So we are still working together actually on a large project, and that is starting from scratch and building the ILM database from scratch with the providers for a very large organization. It's had some challenges and is much more detailed and in depth than we first anticipated, due to, as Alistair mentioned, the lack of information and forthcoming from these vendors, and the complexity that is required in the database in ILM to achieve the efficiencies that we know it's capable of doing. Alistair could probably come up with the technical challenges as well around that, and building out the platform to its full potential and to the client's requirements as well. Most clients, I'd imagine, from Alistair's side, have different requirements, and same from my side, the consultancy side. But it's been a very eye-opening project in terms of the data and the ability to get the amount of automation and time saving and cost saving ultimately that we will achieve by the end of this project.
Yeah, I mean, I see two common areas of being able to build out this solution. Sara talked through both of them really. You know, it's like either you go it alone, trying to work with a team, try to do a bit of mining, data gathering, you know, consulting through different contracts, etc. It's long, it's hard. You need good expertise to do that. Or you can approach these vendors and say, what have you got? What can you send us? You know, what information have you got? And then you can challenge them and work with them to sort of step it up and build more. We are seeing a slow change. You know, before there was complete lack of anything delivered. I think more and more there's becoming some available. Some of the larger vendors have now got some public pages available with APIs that you can pull that data down. The data's not amazing, but it is a start. You know, it's a start in being able to actually identify what you actually are paying for as a license, which really helps, which is definitely not available years ago. And that can be a good start. That can be a good start to your inventory system, to your ILM journey. But it's, you know, if you're only getting that data from one or two of your many 20 plus, 50 plus prominent, you know, index vendors, then it's a real challenge to try and start, you know, generating that good data that you can then build your reporting on, build your invoice processing on, build your, you know, a cost allocation out on. And so, yeah, that's what Sara was really talking about, supplementing, I would think, both of those with, you know, some good knowledge around how to then interpret that data, add to it, build more, and then collect it from other sources like, you know, fund master systems, etc.
Well, Sara and Alistair, thanks both for sharing your time and insights with TabbFORUM today. And for all our viewers who may have missed CJC's report in TabbFORUM, there'll be a big red button at the end of this interview that'll take you to the article. Thanks for stopping by for what was hopefully an educational and entertaining ride on TabbFORUM's Market Structure Wave. Thanks again, Sara and Alistair.
Thank you.
Thank you.